You think you're choosing, that the life you're living, the woman you love, the job you pursue, the way you walk into a room, is all the result of your own decisions. You believe your freedom is intact, untouched. You think you're the one pulling the strings, but what if I told you, you never held the strings at all? There's a man named Lewis, 43, drives a black pickup with dog hair on the seats, 2 kids. Works 12-hour shifts at a construction firm he helped build from the ground up. His coworkers call him solid. His neighbors nod respectfully. He grills every Sunday. He smiles when he doesn't want to. One night, Lewis finds himself standing in his garage, surrounded by half-finished projects and broken promises. His wife, Claire, is asleep upstairs, or maybe she's not. Lately, she's been sleeping with her phone more than with him. But that's not why he's here. He's here because he couldn't sleep. There's this ache, not physical, not even emotional, exactly, just something humming beneath his ribs, something that never quite stops, and tonight, it's louder. He opens a beer. Doesn't drink it, just holds the cold bottle like it might tell him something. That ache, it didn't start last week or last year. It's been there for decades, dressed up in ambition, buried under obligation. You have it too, don't you? That silent pressure behind your eyes when everything's fine, when you've done everything right, and it still doesn't feel like yours. You thought you were living your own life. You thought you made these choices because they made sense, logical, responsible, admirable. But Lewis didn't choose construction because he loved concrete. He chose it because his father once laughed at his drawings, called them feminine. And Claire, she wasn't the only one who wanted kids. She was just the only one who kept bringing it up until silence meant yes. Most men don't realize desire isn't loud, it's subtle. It shows up in what you settle for, in what you stop questioning. You want to believe you're a rational being. That logic guides you, but Freud would tell you otherwise. He'd tell you that under all that logic is something older than reason, something you've never spoken aloud, something that shaped your habits, your tastes, even your morality. You call it preference, he called it repression. You see, the mind doesn't forget what the heart wasn't allowed to want. That's why, when Lewis sees a woman in the grocery store who doesn't know his name, doesn't expect anything from him, doesn't remind him of what he owes, something flares inside him, a flicker not of lust, exactly, but of forgotten self. She doesn't even speak, just walks past him in the fruit aisle, hair pulled back, no ring. And he suddenly feels 14 again, then 21, then 35, all at once, all the versions of himself that he had to kill to be who he is now. He doesn't act on it, of course not. He's a good man, solid, responsible, and yet that ache doesn't go away, it sharpens, because something in him knows this isn't about her. It's not about cheating or desire or fantasy. It's about what he gave up without even realizing it. It's about control. Every man thinks he has it, that he's the captain of his own ship. But control is often just the name we give to a prison we've decorated nicely. You want to be admired. You want to be respected, but you also want to be seen truly, without the armor, without the script. And the older you get, the harder that becomes. There's a reason why men feel a strange pull toward chaos, toward risk, toward the forbidden. It's not because they are broken, it's because something inside them is trying to wake up. That part of you that wanted something, before you learned it was wrong, you buried it, called it childish, dangerous, irresponsible. But buried things don't die, they evolve, they wait, and in the quietest moments, late at night, beer in hand, eyes on a silent garage wall, they speak. You don't need to believe in Freud to feel it. You just need to admit that somewhere along the way, you started living a life that wasn't entirely yours. And once you feel that, truly feel it, something shifts, a discomfort, then a question, then a hunger. Welcome. Tonight, we're not talking about morality, or success, or how to be a better man. We're going deeper into the urges that shaped you, the choices you thought you made, and the secret that's been hiding beneath them all. Like this video. Subscribe if you're ready to see the dark truth most men never face. Take a slow breath. Let's go deeper, but that's only the surface. The real danger hides deeper. Word count 1034. You glance in the mirror every morning, maybe while shaving. Maybe as you straighten your collar before work, but you never really look, do you? Because if you did, if you held your own gaze for more than a second, you might feel it again, that flicker, that unspoken recognition. Like a stranger staring back through your own face. There's a reason most men avoid mirrors. Not out of vanity, not out of shame, but because the reflection remembers everything you've tried to forget. You were 5 the first time you were told, "Don't cry like that." 7 when someone laughed at how you held your hands. 9 when you learned that being quiet made the adults praise you. Each of those moments passed. You thought they faded. They didn't. They settled behind your eyes. They became the architecture of your reflection. And now, decades later, every time you see yourself, you feel something you can't explain. Not guilt, not sadness, something colder. Like the outline of a shadow you never acknowledged. Freud once said the unconscious never forgets, that every suppressed desire, every shamed reaction, doesn't vanish. It hides and waits. Most men have spent their lives building a mask. The reliable mask, the strong one, the clever one, the unshakable one, and the mirror, it never shows the mask. It shows the cracks behind it. There's a man named Jordan, divorced, 51, works in finance, takes care of his mother. Goes on the occasional date when the apps feel generous. From the outside, he's rebuilt himself, but Jordan avoids hotel mirrors, public ones, any reflection that doesn't let him look away fast. Last year, after a client dinner, he stepped into an elevator lined with polished metal walls. Couldn't escape the sight of himself, tired, lonely, but it wasn't just exhaustion, it was recognition. A sudden flash of a boy he used to be, before he was taught that feelings were something to manage, not experience. He told himself it was just fatigue, just the wine, but the next morning, he couldn't shake it. The way his own reflection had looked back at him, not with judgment, but with a kind of quiet betrayal. Like it knew how many parts of himself he'd traded just to survive. You've done the same, haven't you? You've adjusted your tone around certain people, nodded when you didn't agree, chosen what to want based not on desire, but on what wouldn't disrupt the peace. You buried parts of yourself because they were inconvenient, too intense, too strange, too hard to explain. And those parts, they didn't vanish. They're still in the mirror, still in your shoulders, still in your silence. There's a reason certain memories come back at 2:00 a.m. uninvited. Why a song from 20 years ago can make your chest ache for no reason. Why you sometimes feel like a fraud, even in moments of success. Because your mind is smarter than you let it be. It stores every compromise, every forced smile, every moment you wanted to scream but didn't, and eventually it wants repayment. That's when the reflection shifts. You don't just see yourself, you start to see the versions of you that you buried, the boy who wanted to dance but stopped, the teenager who wrote poetry in secret, the man who almost said no but didn't, the self that existed before you became a provider, a protector, a professional. And when those versions look back, what do? Most men flinch. Some laugh it off, a few turn away entirely, but if you look long enough, really look, you'll notice something else. Not just the sadness, not just the age, but a hunger to be seen, even by you. Because when you spend your whole life being what others need, you forget what you needed. The mirror knows, it doesn't accuse, it just remembers. That's why Freud warned us, not about desire itself, but about the cost of not facing it. The cost of pretending your life has always been chosen, not inherited, not coerced, not quietly handed down through unspoken rules and family roles and cultural pressure. What do you see when you look at yourself? A man who made the right decisions. Or a man who forgot how to ask himself the right questions? The mirror doesn't lie. But it will wait until you're ready to, because at some point, when the noise fades and the masks slip, you'll have to face him, not the version others loved. Not the one they promoted, or depended on, or married, but the one you left behind. The one who still waits behind your eyes, wondering if you'll ever come back for him. The one you silenced, and when you finally meet him again, what will you say? But that's only the beginning. The voice you silenced is about to speak. Word count 1, 0, 20. It starts subtly. You begin speaking differently, not just the words, but the rhythm, the pauses, the softening of your tone. You stop finishing your own sentences because you're already anticipating her reaction, and before you realize it, you're no longer speaking to her, you're speaking through her filter. You tell yourself it's just politeness. That compromise is what makes things work, that being aware of her emotions makes you a good partner, a better man, and maybe that's true at first. But then one day, you sit across from her at the dinner table, and she asks you what you think about something, anything, and you pause, because you're not sure anymore, not because you don't have thoughts, but because your first instinct isn't to answer honestly. Your first instinct is to answer safely. That's how it begins. Control doesn't always show up with shackles. Sometimes it arrives wearing affection, validation, intimacy. Her love becomes a mirror you try to keep clean, polished, but over time, it fogs. And you find yourself adjusting not because of clarity, but because of fear, not fear of punishment, fear of disconnection, of withdrawal, of disappointing the version of you she's built in her mind. There's a man named Marcus, 38, works in advertising, married 6 years, 2 kids, 1 dog, 1 mortgage, the kind of man who once believed in big dreams. Now he's just tired all the time. He's not unhappy, but he's not himself either. He used to write short stories late at night, pages filled with strange, unsettling ideas. Things he never showed anyone, not because they were bad, but because they were his, private, untouched. Then his wife, Rachel, read one by accident, laughed at it, said it was a creepy. That was 4 years ago. He hasn't written a word since. She didn't forbid him. She didn't need to. Her reaction was enough. The mask he wears now. He stitched it together himself, thread by thread, until even his silence matched the pattern she liked best. You've done this too, haven't you? Let a glance change your tone. Let a sigh rewrite your decision. Let love become a leash you called a respect. Most men don't realize how easily the desire to be loved becomes the reason they vanish. You stop saying what you want. Not because you're scared of conflict, but because you've learned to confuse comfort with peace. You forget that your voice has a weight, a texture, a truth, until it's gone, and what replaces it? Her words, her logic, her preferences. You find yourself defending things you don't actually believe, just to keep the balance. You go along with choices that make you feel small, so she won't feel challenged. You start using her phrases, echoing her arguments, becoming a more agreeable version of yourself. But here's the truth Freud understood, even when others mocked him. When a man suppresses his voice for too long, it doesn't make him more loving, it makes him more hollow. Because control isn't always external, sometimes it's internalized, a whisper inside you saying, "Don't rock the boat. Don't ruin the moment. Don't make her uncomfortable." But that whisper isn't kindness, it's fear wearing perfume. It's compliance, disguised as compatibility. It's the beginning of erosion, and erosion doesn't happen overnight. It happens in small moments. The laugh you swallow, the joke you don't make, the opinion you file down until it's smooth enough not to offend. You become a translator, not a participant. You begin to edit yourself in real time, and over time, you forget what the original script ever looked like. The scariest part, she doesn't even notice, because to her, you're still here, still present, still agreeable. She doesn't see that the man across from her is no longer choosing, he's reacting. She doesn't see that your silence isn't peace, it's absence. That your nods are rehearsed, that your desires have been packed away in some distant drawer, labeled too much. And every time you sit in that silence, a part of you asks, what if I said what I actually thought? What if I told her what I really wanted? What if I let the words fall out without softening the edges? Would she still love me? Would she still stay? That's the question most men never ask aloud, because they're afraid of the answer. Afraid that the real voice, the one buried under years of soft approval and careful agreement, might not be lovable after all. But let me ask you this, if love only survives when you stay silent, is it love? Or is it just a performance with high stakes? The moment you stop hearing your own voice is the moment you stop being the main character in your own story. And if you keep it up long enough, you won't even realize you've become a background actor in a life that was supposed to be yours. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is, she doesn't even have to take your power, you gave it away. But that's only the beginning. The part of you she can't touch is about to rise. Word count 1076. You were groomed to be good, not by one person, not with malicious intent, but by the world around you, quietly, consistently, over time. From the moment you were old enough to want something, the training began. Be polite, don't talk back. Be a gentleman, put others first. You were rewarded for compliance, praised for self-control, liked when you were agreeable. And over the years, without knowing it, you learned a rule: a good man doesn't need much. A good man gives, he supports, he protects, he endures, and when he's hurt, he swallows it. No one told you this directly. It was baked into the tone your teacher used when you spoke too loudly, in the side eyes your father gave you when you cried, in the way women smiled at you when you nodded, and frowned when you disagreed. So you adapted, you stopped needing, stopped asking, you learned to be useful instead of honest, stable instead of real, and they applauded you for it. They told you how reliable you were, how mature, how easy to love, but they weren't loving you, were they? They were loving your restraint, the mask you wore to earn that love, and deep down, you felt it. You just didn't have the words for it, until now. There's a man named Theo, 50, married, twice, works in education, known for being calm, grounded, unshakable, the man people call when everything is falling apart. He listens more than he speaks. When his first marriage ended, everyone said how gracefully he handled it. When his second wife had an affair, they said he was a strong. But in private, Theo sits alone in his study at night, lights low, whiskey in hand, watching the ceiling fan spin in circles, round and round. He's not angry, that would be easier, he's blank. Because for 40 years, he gave everyone what they needed: stability, safety, support, and no one ever asked what he needed. Not even him. You know that feeling, don't you, of being everything for everyone and nothing for yourself? Of being dependable, but never desired, appreciated, but not understood. Freud once wrote about the superego, the internal voice of authority, built from childhood. It tells you who you must be to be a good. But Freud also warned, when that voice becomes too strong, it crushes the ID, the part of you that wants, that feels, that burns, and when that happens, a man doesn't live, he performs, he becomes obedient, domesticated, safe. But safety is a cage when it costs you yourself. You were trained to be that way. To stay small, to shrink your hungers, to be pleasant, agreeable, predictable. They told you that being emotional was weakness, that wanting more was selfish, that anger was dangerous, so you buried those parts, and now you can't even find them. You sit in meetings, smiling, you listen to friends talk, nodding, you lie next to her at night, silent. Not because you're at peace, but because you've forgotten what it's like to speak freely. You're not broken. You're well trained. That's what makes it so hard to notice. You've worn the leash so long, you think it's jewelry, and the world, it keeps rewarding you for it. They call you dependable, a rock, a gentleman, but none of that touches the part of you that's starving, the part that wants to scream, not out of rage, but out of desperation to be seen, to be real. There's something you haven't admitted. You're tired of being good, not because you want to be bad, but because a good, it was never your idea to begin with. It was a role handed to you, and you've played it so long you forgot it was optional. What if you weren't built to carry everyone else? What if you were meant to lead from truth, not from tolerance? What if all the rules you obeyed were never meant for a man like you? The moment that thought appears, everything shifts. The pride in being the good one starts to taste like rust. The praise feels thin. And you begin to wonder what would happen if you stopped playing nice, not violent, not cruel, just honest, direct, unapologetic. Would they still love you? Would you still love yourself? That's the fear, isn't it? That if you stop being what they expect, they'll walk away. But here's the truth. They already walked away from the real you a long time ago, and you let them. Because being accepted felt safer than being known. But that's not living, that's negotiation. And a life built on negotiation always ends in quiet resentment. You were groomed to be good, but something older in you is waking up. And it doesn't want to be good, it wants to be whole. But that's only the surface. The part they trained is about to meet the part you buried. A word count, 1050. You remember the first time you saw her, not her name, not the setting, but the feeling, that jolt, quick and electric, like something inside you had been waiting without knowing it. You called it chemistry, attraction, maybe even fate. But if you look closer, it wasn't her that set the flame, it was what she represented. It wasn't just her smile, or her scent, or the curve of her voice when she said your name. It was the possibility, the idea that she could unlock something in you, make you feel again, make you remember what it's like to want without explanation. Because by then, you were already numb from years of duty, of compromise, of being the man who has it all together. And when she appeared, she didn't just catch your eye, she stirred your hunger, the one you don't talk about, not sexual, Deeper the hunger to be chosen, not needed. There's a man named Caleb, 40, quiet, looks like he has nothing to prove, works in tech, keeps to himself, never talks much about his divorce. But ask him about Eva, the woman he met at a conference last year, and his entire body changes. He doesn't say much, just that she had a way of looking at him that made him feel dangerous again. Like he could say anything, do anything, and she wouldn't flinch. She didn't want him for what he provided. She didn't ask him to be sensible. She didn't care how responsible he was. She just wanted his edge. And for the first time in years, he felt it again, that part of him that wasn't safe, wasn't edited, wasn't agreeable, the part that burned. They never slept together, they didn't need to, the real affair happened inside him. The moment she looked at him and didn't ask for anything, but awakened everything. Most men don't realize this. Desire isn't always about possession, it's about recognition. You don't want her because of what she does. You want her because of what she sees in you, and sometimes that gaze can ignite a fire you thought you buried. But here's the truth you don't want to admit. The flame she lit, it was never for you. It was for the feeling you gave her, the power, the attention, the mirror. You were chasing something she never promised to give. You mistook the spark for a signal. You thought it meant connection, but more often than not, it meant control, not hers over you, yours over yourself. Because when you burn for her, you feel alive, but what you're really doing is burning your boundaries, ignoring your own rules, sacrificing your clarity for a moment of intensity, and you do it willingly. Because for a flicker of time, you're no longer the man others expect. You're just you, unmasked, unfiltered, unreasonable, and it feels like freedom until it doesn't, because eventually she walks away, not cruelly, not suddenly, just coolly. Like the fire was never hers to keep, and you're left staring at the ashes, wondering how something that felt so real could leave you with so little. You blame her at first. You tell yourself she used you, manipulated you, played with your emotions. But if you're honest, she didn't lie. You projected, you assigned meaning, you built a story. All because of what she made you feel. That heat, that rush, it wasn't love. It was your own hunger, finally given a place to breathe. Freud would call it transference, the projection of your unmet needs onto someone who activates them. Not because they're right for you, but because they awaken the parts you've suppressed. Desire doesn't make you weak, but chasing it blindly does. Especially when the flame was never meant to warm you, only to expose you. Because here's the part most men never face. You weren't in love with her, you were in love with who you were in her presence, and when she left, you didn't miss her. You missed that version of yourself, the one that felt dangerous, uncaged, desired. That version is still inside you, waiting, but you've spent so long outsourcing your ignition to women like her, you've forgotten how to light the match yourself. So when she disappears, you feel empty, not because you lost something, but because she reminded you of what you never truly owned. You keep chasing that flame, different faces, same pattern. Each one giving you a glimpse of the man you want to be, but never staying long enough to let you keep him. And maybe that's the point. Maybe they're not the problem. Maybe they were just the mirror. The real question is, why can't you hold that fire on your own? But that's only the beginning. The next truth will burn deeper than any flame. Word count 1032. I remember the exact moment the air changed in that therapy room. Not physically, no shift in temperature or lighting, but something in me tightened, like an old rope pulled too fast around a winch. I had just finished explaining a recurring dream to Dr. Lentz. One where I'm walking down a long hallway, walls lined with portraits, all of them of me, but different versions. Young me, angry me, me in a soldier's uniform, me standing at an altar, alone. Each version stared as I passed, but none spoke. Dr. Lentz didn't ask questions about the dream itself, not at first. Instead, she said something that knocked the wind out of me without raising her voice. Do you think one of those versions might be the man you never allowed yourself to become? I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just stared at the worn edge of her notepad and wondered if I'd ever feel comfortable answering anything honestly, but the question stayed. It followed me into my car, into the quiet drive home, and through my silent dinner. Even brushing my teeth that night felt different, like the man in the mirror was watching me too carefully. For decades, I had moved through life with precision, with control. I married young, stayed faithful, raised 2 sons with firm rules and fair consequences. I worked hard, paid the mortgage, fixed what broke. I believed that if I kept everything in line, the chaos my father brought into my childhood would never find me again. I thought I had outrun him, until that dream, until Dr. Lentz asked if I had simply buried parts of myself instead. In the weeks that followed, I kept returning to the same thought. What had I sacrificed in order to feel safe? I'd been proud of my restraint, my ability to keep emotions neat and folded. But now I began to wonder, had I mistaken repression for discipline? Had I turned my back on my own depth? The next time I met with Dr. Lentz, I was quieter, not defensive, just listening, and she asked if I ever thought about what scared me most. Not the obvious fears, like loss or illness, but the ones I never spoke aloud. I surprised myself by saying it. I'm afraid I don't really know how to love freely. The words stunned us both. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Love had always felt like a transaction. Earn it, hold it, protect it. I never let it just be. I never let it change shape. And suddenly I could hear my wife's voice, years ago, after a cold argument over something I can't even remember now. She said, "It's like you love me from a distance, like you're afraid to step too close to your own feelings." I dismissed her then, said she was being dramatic, but now, sitting in Dr. Lentz's office with that same knot in my chest, I wondered if she'd seen a truth I couldn't bear to face. Maybe it wasn't that I didn't feel deeply. Maybe it was that I felt too much and never learned how to handle it. I began writing things down between sessions, small memories, my oldest son's first football game, how I clapped, but never hugged him after the win. The night my father came home drunk and broke the kitchen chair, and how I stood completely still, watching my mother quietly pick up the pieces. My wedding day, how tightly I gripped my vows, afraid I might drop the words if I didn't control them perfectly. I started to see a pattern, always still, always composed, always just a little too far from the fire. But something shifted when I let myself revisit those moments, not just with facts, but with feeling. I started to allow discomfort in, not fight it, and in doing so, I began to feel something I hadn't in a long time, tenderness for myself, not pride. Not pity, just a strange, aching gentleness. One night, sitting alone in the garage where I kept old photo boxes, I found a picture of me holding my youngest son at the beach. His face was turned up to mine, beaming. I, on the other hand, looked tired, not from lack of sleep, but from the effort of holding so much in. I stared at that photo for a long time, tracing the lines of my own face. And for the first time, I felt sorrow, not for what I'd done, but for what I had missed. I placed the photo on my desk in the study, not hiding it back in the box. It didn't feel like a wound anymore, more like a key. At the next session, Dr. Lenz asked me how I felt when I looked at that image. I see a man doing his best, I said slowly. But I also see a man who doesn't know how to let himself be seen. She didn't rush to interpret it, just nodded. And we sat in the quiet for a while, the kind of silence that isn't empty but full, like a held breath finally released. That silence told me I wasn't broken, just unfinished, maybe even just beginning. The first snow of that winter came quietly, like it always did here. I was sipping coffee by the window, the same chipped mug Martha had bought for me on our 20th anniversary. A small crack ran down one side now, barely noticeable unless you knew where to look. I always did. The snow clung gently to the bare branches outside, and for some reason, it made everything seem slower, heavier. She came into the room with that silence she'd mastered over the years, not the kind of silence born of peace, but the type forged in long avoidance. She sat on the edge of the armchair, holding a folded laundry towel in her lap like she didn't know what to do with her hands. "We need to talk," she said softly, eyes fixed on the floor, those 4 words. "They've never meant anything good, have they?" I didn't answer right away. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the bitterness steady me. I've always taken time before I speak, maybe too much time. That's part of the problem, I guess. I sit with things until they rot inside me, Martha went on, even without my invitation. I didn't want to hurt you. It wasn't about you. It just happened. She kept her voice measured, like she'd practiced this conversation in her head a dozen times. It was years ago, a long time ago, but I've carried it with me ever since, every day. She didn't say the words outright, not then, but I knew. Maybe I'd always known on some level, in the way a houseplant knows when it's being neglected. Not dead yet, but not thriving either. I set the mug down, not quite making it to the coaster. "His name?" I asked, finally. She shook her head slowly, more like a flinch than a no. "It doesn't matter. That's not what I asked." "David," she said after a long pause. "Just the name, David. No details, no timeline. But that name hit me like a frozen shovel to the back. David, my old friend, the one who helped me put up the storm windows one year when my back was out. The one who brought over his famous chili during that blackout. The one who called me a brother." I didn't say anything for a long while. I didn't ask how long, or how many times, or if she loved him. The room stretched out between us like a frozen lake, and neither of us dared to take a step. Instead, I stood and walked to the garage. I needed to move. My hands needed something to do. The workbench was dusty, tools scattered from a half-finished birdhouse I never got around to. I picked up a piece of sandpaper and began smoothing the edge of a pine board, back and forth, back and forth. The friction warmed my fingers, gave me something to hold onto. After a while, she came out and leaned against the doorframe. "Say something," she whispered. "I'm sanding," I said. Without looking up, she didn't respond. She just stood there, arms folded, eyes flicking between me and the piece of wood like she didn't recognize either of us. I didn't ask her to leave. I didn't scream. That's not my way. What I did instead was go through the motions of that day like everything was still intact. Because if I stopped, even for a second, I knew I'd unravel. That night, I sat in bed with the lamp on while she pretended to sleep beside me. I stared at the ceiling, tracing cracks I'd never noticed before. The room smelled faintly of lavender from her pillow, familiar, comforting, and now tainted. I remembered a moment from our early days, her sitting on the porch in summer, hair still damp from a shower, sipping iced tea and humming to herself. I'd thought then that I'd found home. That small image came to me so sharply it felt like a slap. How far we'd come, how far we'd fallen. Still, I didn't leave. I didn't lash out. My stubbornness, the same thing that kept me loyal and silent all these years, now became my shield, or maybe my prison. I didn't know yet. But in that silence, I began to understand that forgiveness is not a switch, it's a slow erosion. A wearing down, not of love, but of certainty, and I was only just beginning to feel the cracks. When I wake up the next morning, the house is eerily quiet, not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that makes your ears strain for a sound that won't come. I lie there in bed, listening, no hum of the kettle. No shuffling of feet in the hallway, no muted radio in the kitchen playing her morning news, just stillness. The sunlight spills across the hardwood floor like it always does, but even that feels colder. I sit up, slowly, letting my feet touch the cool wood, and I glance over at her side of the bed. It's untouched, the pillow still plump, blanket folded over neatly, like she never came back. I don't call her, I don't even text. That's the kind of man I've been all these years. Someone who waits, someone who listens more than he speaks, someone who assumes silence has meaning. And it does. Her silence is loud now, deafening, really. Instead, I make coffee, 1 cup, just mine. That feels strange. For 40 years, I've poured 2 cups without thinking. Today, I hesitate over the second mug, the one with the little blue chip on the rim that's always been hers. I leave it in the cabinet. I can't bear to see it empty. By the time I sit down at the table, the coffee's already lukewarm. I drink it anyway. My eyes drift across the room and land on the stack of mail on the counter. She usually sorts it, tosses the junk, leaves the bills for me. But now it just sits there, waiting, like everything else. There's something about living with a person for so long that you start to forget where they end and you begin. I realize this as I move through the day, bumping into her absence like it's furniture that's been rearranged in the dark. The air in the house feels different, like it's holding its breath. By afternoon, I brake, I drive. I don't know where I'm going, just that I can't stay still. The road takes me past our old haunts, the bakery she used to like, the lake we walked around in the fall, the tiny cafe where we had our first real fight. Each place tugs at something inside me, like a loose thread I shouldn't pull but can't help touching. Eventually, I end up in front of my brother's hardware store. Not because I need anything, but because it's familiar, and I need someone to look at me like I'm still whole. He sees me come in, wipes his hands on a rag, and says nothing at first, just nods. Something wrong? He finally asks, like he already knows the answer but wants to give me the space to say it. She's gone, I reply. The words catch in my throat. At least, she didn't come home. He leans on the counter and looks at me the way only a brother can, like he's watching you through the years, not just the moment. You want to talk about it? I'm not even sure what I'd say. We sit in the back office. He offers me half a sandwich he didn't finish. I take it. It's dry, and the bread's too thick, but it feels like something. Like care unspoken. He tells me about a customer who tried to return a screwdriver from 1998. I chuckle, and it surprises me. After a long pause, he says, maybe it's time you stop pretending everything's fine when it's not. I look down at the half-eaten sandwich. I don't know how to be any other way. He shrugs. Then maybe it's time to learn. On the drive back, I take the long way home. The sun's already starting to dip low, and the clouds are a thick gray that promises rain. There's a certain kind of loneliness that seeps in right before a storm. It settles in your bones. I remember once, years ago, she told me she loved the smell of rain on dry pavement. She said it reminded her of her childhood. I don't know why that comes back to me now. At home, the house is still quiet. I sit on the edge of the bed and open the drawer in her nightstand. I'm not sure what I'm looking for. Answers, maybe. Proof that I wasn't crazy to think we had something real. Inside, there's a bundle of old birthday cards, rubber banded together. My handwriting on every envelope, one of them, from 20 years ago, has a message I don't even remember writing. Even when I don't know how to say it, I love you. I read it again, then I set it down. Outside, the rain starts. I open the window just a crack, enough to let the scent drift in. It's faint, earthy. It fills the room with something like memory, or maybe longing. I close my eyes and breathe it in. The rain comes down in thin, even sheets, tapping gently on the hood of my truck as I sit parked outside the nursing home. I haven't come here since Mom passed. I told myself it was out of respect, that I didn't want to stir up old ghosts. But the truth is simpler and smaller. I was afraid I'd see her face in someone else's eyes and crumble. But today, I need silence and the kind of quiet people carry in places like this, not the fake kind at church or the empty kind in the house. I want the kind of silence that wraps around you like an old blanket and smells faintly of hand lotion and tapioca pudding. Inside, the corridors are warm and dim. A woman in a lavender cardigan hums softly to herself as she shuffles past with a walker, the tennis balls on the legs scuffing rhythmically on the linoleum. I find an empty bench near a dusty aquarium where two old goldfish float, disinterested, in their foggy world. I sit down and let my shoulders sag, as if gravity is doing the kind of work I no longer can. A nurse walks by, gives me a nod. She doesn't ask who I'm here to see. Maybe I look like I belong here. Maybe I do. My hands rest in my lap, and I notice a tremor I hadn't felt before. Not fear, not exactly. It's something between restlessness and regret. Like a dog pawing at a closed door it's too old to push open. My phone buzzes in my pocket. I ignore it. It could be Grace again, trying to check in on me in her quiet, methodical way. Always a short message, never a call. That's her style. After the fallout with Teresa, she's stepped lightly around me, like I might break or lash out. But I won't. I'm tired of anger. It's a coat I've worn too long, and it itches at the soul. Across from me, an old man sits hunched in a wheelchair, staring blankly at the TV where some game show host grins too wide, his teeth shining like false promises. The old man turns to me suddenly and says, "Is she used to knit during these shows?" Always dropped a stitch when they rang the bell. His voice is cracked, but there's a clarity in it. A memory he's held onto like a pebble in his pocket. I nod, though I don't know what to say. "You married?" he asks. I say, my voice raspier than usual. 40 years, a long time, he says. Then, is she gone? I shake my head. No, still around, just not with me. He doesn't press, just goes back to staring at the screen like it doesn't matter either way. And maybe it doesn't. I've started to realize that most people carry wounds that don't bleed anymore. just ache when it rains. I walk the halls for a while, passing rooms filled with photos, breathing machines, half-played card games. In one room, a woman hums an unchained melody to herself as she brushes a doll's hair. The sound stops me. That was our wedding song. Teresa had chosen it. I'd wanted something more upbeat, something we could dance to without looking like we were clinging to each other out of necessity. But she insisted, said the lyrics meant more than rhythm. I wonder now if she understood them better than I did. I step into the chapel at the end of the hall, empty, stained glass flickering with the gray light outside. I sit in the last pew, the wood cold beneath me. I don't pray, I never really knew how. But I speak out loud, like someone might be listening anyway. I still don't hate her, I say. The words echo quietly in the small room. I want to, I think I should, but I don't. I swallow. I just keep seeing the way she looked at me at the kitchen table, like I was someone she'd already buried. Oh, the silence that follows isn't comforting, but it's honest. Eventually, I leave. The rain has stopped. The sun pokes through the clouds like it's testing the air. On the drive home, I pass the cafe where Teresa and I used to get Sunday breakfast. I don't stop, but I glance at the window and imagine her sitting inside, stirring her coffee absently with the back of the spoon, something she always did that made me crazy. At home, I find the box still sitting by the front door. The one with her things. I was supposed to take it to her weeks ago. Instead, I sit with it. Pull out a scarf, a candle, her favorite mug, the one that says "Arise and Wine" in faded script, and at the bottom, a photo, us. Young, reckless, smiling like fools, the beach behind us, her lipstick smudged on my collar, a memory I'd never noticed until now. I don't cry, but something softens in my chest, like a knot beginning to loosen. That night, I sleep on the couch, not out of self-punishment, but because it feels honest. The bed still holds the shape of her absence, and I'm not ready to lie to myself, not yet. The last time I walked into that old backyard, the one where her sunflowers used to stretch tall like sentinels, I didn't expect the scent of damp earth to catch in my throat the way it did. Rain had passed earlier that morning, and everything smelled like memory. I stood there, hands in my coat pockets, watching droplets slide down the patio table we'd picked out together 30 years ago. One of the chairs was missing. I don't know why that detail bothered me most, but it did, maybe because it made the whole picture look uneven, incomplete, like us. A week had passed since the final conversation, not the angry one. Not the revelation or the trembling silence that followed, but the quiet one, the one where we discussed what to do with the shared bills, the dog, the garage clutter. The one where we no longer argued, because all the real battles had already been lost. There was something brutal about the calmness. I had imagined that separation would feel like pulling apart two magnets, resistance, sparks, force. But it felt more like laying down a heavy coat you'd forgotten you were wearing. I hadn't told many people yet. Some of our old friends would find out eventually, I figured, through the polite whispers of small-town networks. Others might never know. And that was fine. The truth was no longer something I needed to spread, only something I had to live with. That's the part no one warns you about, how much living remains after the truth breaks open. I sat on the porch step and opened the small notebook I'd been carrying around. Just scraps of thoughts, really. A list of things to remember: cancel the joint account, call the lawyer, pick up socks from dry cleaners. But beneath those tasks, I'd scribbled something that caught my eye, a line I barely remembered writing. Oh, she said it was loneliness, not hate. My pen had pressed deep into the paper. I must have written it that night. I couldn't sleep. It didn't excuse anything, but it explained a little, and sometimes that's all you get. The neighbor's wind chime clinked gently in the breeze. I watched the petals of a forgotten rosebush stir beside the fence. So much of life goes on without our permission. That bush had bloomed every spring since we planted it together, whether we were speaking or not, whether we were holding hands or sleeping with our backs to each other. Nature doesn't wait for apologies. There was a photo I kept now in my wallet, not of her, but of us long ago, blurry and smiling, sitting on a picnic blanket, our legs tangled like we hadn't yet learned to be careful. I looked at it sometimes when I needed to remember that not everything was a lie. Some parts had been good, or at least true in the moment. I met with my brother that afternoon. We sat in a diner off Route 7, the kind that smells like toast and old coffee and a hint of lemon cleanser. He didn't ask questions, just passed me the ketchup like we were kids again, sharing fries and silence. At one point, he said, "You'll grow into the quiet. It'll fit eventually." I nodded. There was a peace in knowing he didn't expect me to bounce back, only to keep going. That night, I returned to the rental apartment. It still didn't feel like home. Too clean, too bare, but it was mine. I hung one framed picture, an old painting of a dock at dusk, the kind you find at flea markets. I didn't know why it comforted me. Maybe because it looked like a place between things, not the shore, not the sea. Just the dock, waiting. I brewed tea the way I always had, black, no sugar. The mug was chipped from a drawer full of mismatched dishes, but it warmed my hands all the same. I stood by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on, and let the stillness settle in my bones. It's strange how endings arrive so quietly. No grand music, no cinematic fade to black, just the clink of a spoon against porcelain. A long exhale, and the soft sound of rain returning, not to wash anything away, but simply because that's what rain does. Maybe forgiveness isn't a moment. Maybe it's a muscle that stretches slowly, over months, even years. I didn't feel it yet. But I'd stopped looking for revenge, and maybe that was the first step. I took one last sip and turned off the light. Behind me, the kettle clicked as it cooled. Ahead of me, the hallway was dim but open. I walked toward it, barefoot on cold tile, not knowing what came next, but no longer afraid of the silence. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening, for staying with me through all of it. I know this story hasn't been easy. It wasn't easy to live through either, but maybe that's the point. Maybe the hardest stories to tell are the ones that matter most. If there's something in here that made you stop and think, even just for a second, then I've done what I set out to do. We don't always get justice. We don't always get answers wrapped in bows, but sometimes we get something quieter. Something steadier, a kind of peace that only comes after you've walked through fire and kept walking anyway. And maybe you've walked through your own version of it. If you have, if this stirred something in you, I'd like to hear it. Share your story in the comments, or just say hi, because what we carry inside us doesn't have to stay buried, not always. If this story resonated with you, do me a favor, click the like button. It helps more than you think. And if you want to hear more stories like this, real stories, raw stories, go ahead and subscribe. There's more to come. Some stories break us, some build us, and some just need to be told. Thanks for being here.